is slowing down a lot, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on. I'm getting some really weird messages lately, but I'm gonna have to go ahead with this episode because of some of the strange stuff that's happened recently. The rest of you gotta know. It's mostly up here in Michigan, but I'm just gonna go through the rest of this. Episode 22, season 5, odds and ends. Simply stated, as most of you know, I'm also volunteer for Northern Border Patrol, so I'm going to be doing these episodes, at least as part of that. Hold on, the feed was skipping there. Okay, so as most of you know, I never talked about this stuff in person. When I found most people get too confused by the topics. I spent so much time working on it. Have my own security clearance for the time when I worked for home health and took care of people who were retired from major government jobs, the CIA, NSA, Pentagon, private organizations, the World Bank, all that around Washington, D.C. So, anyways, I'm just going to go ahead with this episode, as weird as it's going to come off. But most of you probably who live down Traverse City remember Annika Hansen. She worked at the Panera Bread there, got fired, and then went to work at the Panera Bread there for a while, a couple years ago, and they got fired. She tried to work at the children's, I don't know what you want to call that, the Great Wolf Lodge where the kids hang out, and then got fired from there as well. Apparently she was up at Dollar Tree in Petoskey, and then now is working as a manager at the Panera Bread in Petoskey. This is someone who is actually supposed to be serving out a serial term, is wanted by the U.S. government at a federal level. And I don't know how she would have been able to hide out, except what I've realized is that she's been clearly hanging out with a bunch of men that were identified as being Russian GRU. This is the location, picture of the Panera Bread. Actually, maybe none of you can even see that. Hold on. Let's see. We'll have like a war of pictures here. You can't even see it on the phone. Anyways, you can kind of see it there. It's like, nope, not really. Hold on. Wait, let's see. We go like with it. Maybe that way it'll work. But, could you see it? Like, I just don't care about this stuff. I'm like, oh my god, here it is. There you go. Everyone wants a picture because they're like nuts and can't deal with just looking stuff up on maps. But it's literally next door to the Wild Bill's Tobacco, which I happen to think those are really fun. But so it's just funny because when I just stopped in this morning, I mean, people were literally like laughing. She's supposed to be serving a federal term for multiple numbers of felonies down in Virginia, actually, and is actually wanted. She's Chinese CCP, but she's also apparently hanging out with like a bunch of Russian GRU dudes who've been protecting her. That's the only reason I can think of that she survived this long. But serial rapist, offender, buddy with Christopher Wray. And it's not like there was a political party that would support her. She's a fob that came into the U.S. in the 80s, landed in Dubuque, Iowa. Long history of acting out. Disgusting pervert, child rapist. Literally just an idiot that breaks into people's houses and rapes them. Also known as the actress Rachel McAdams. I think she settled up here thinking that they would have another go around to raise money for films, but the funding and everything has just been cut off. Like all operations have just been cut off. So, anyways, I'm up in Michigan if you're wondering, but I'm letting you know the latest location that she's gone to, so Northern Border Control can go ahead and do what they claim to want to be doing. We're just throwing out illegal immigrants or putting them in prison or, shipping them out. But that one actually needs to go. So she's apparently working as the manager over at the Panera Bread. I'm not even going to bother doing an official police report because she might actually read one of those and then, would not go into work or just disappear again. So, but yeah, she actually needs to be apprehended and picked up. So anytime like Tom, what is it? Tom Homan's supposed to be head of Border Patrol for the U.S. Like, yeah, you actually should pick that one up. It's not from the U.S. It doesn't belong here. It's actually supposed to be serving a federal prison sentence right now. And it's apparently thinks it's the manager over at Panera Bread in Petoskey. So, I've never seen anything so ridiculous. This is just dumb. But, yeah, so, let's see. Well, I don't have time anyways. I'm going to move on to the rest of the show for those of you who are curious about this. Like, I ended up changing locations, was dealing with domestic violence again. So I've had to do what people in that situation do, which is literally move around again. Why this keeps happening to me is literally the fault of my own federal government because they did more than enough investigations into all of this and could have stopped it a long time ago and simply didn't. So, what I do know is that with Annika's people, even her contacts in the Russian GRU and Chinese CCP, is they keep turning her in. So she must be really, really obnoxious. She must be a lot like, seriously, the woman who trafficked me for all those years. And some of the people just really want to get, even among her own. Because otherwise they wouldn't keep doing that to her. I need to go through some other topics. So Andrew Parks has had some kind of relationship to her, may even be her actual husband in the U.S. That was the guy who used to work at the Heritage Foundation. I'm just letting you know. He's... I don't want to get into it anyways. He was just somebody I knew that worked at the Heritage Foundation. Seemed to be having an awfully hard time, and I didn't really want to know anything more than that. There were so many people that were tied up with different hate groups that turned out to be you would decide knowing them yourself that they were tied in with the Russian FSB or Chinese CCP, fake front churches, like the PCUSA, all that. It's just really important to know, like, just to know. So I don't even know where he's at now. I think he might be up here in Michigan around himself, which is why I'm saying that. And I don't know what's going on with the two of them that he would do that when he's supposed to be her husband. Maybe they're like partners through Russian government contracting, Russian Chinese schmangle shit. So I need to know for you, Tulsi Gabbard, who is still considered the head of national intelligence, but she actually works for Booz Allen Hamilton, is she's an overt labor trafficker, child trafficker, and her new signal color for people that are involved in her movements, the hate movements, is mustard. So she told me that last summer. I really didn't want to know, but I did run into somebody recently. You're not going to believe who it was. After all these years of investigations and work, it turned out that Meryl Streep is actually the person that many of you knew as Lynn Weiss back in Dubuque, Iowa. And I ran into her because I went to interview at Admire. They were going to offer me the job, but frankly, I just, with as crazy as that area was over in Gaylord, I don't think I'm going to want to work there. No one would. It's true what Jamie Lee Curtis said about them wanting to switch, like the terrorist groups all want to switch over, Russian and Chinese groups. They're doing all the hate stuff, basically. They want to switch to attacking Myers and doing setups in them now instead of Walmart's because Walmart's cracked down on it all so much. That doesn't mean either store being in that's a big warehouse setup is going to be safe for anybody, but I'm just letting you know, John Sly has been working on the new movie. He's a pastor, but he also works for Endeavor Corp. That's the guy who originally stole the material from me for JLo. Drafted myself and one other woman to create JLo's fake career. Had to get away from him. He's working on their new Devil Wears Prada movie. So Meryl Streep apparently has turned out to be much more of a gorilla than I ever realized, having seen her in person. I don't know if any of this stuff is really that important to know, except for the rest of you just need to know because you may say, well, you don't watch movies or really care about entertainment. Same with me. I'm too busy. Here's the problem. These groups actually do travel around the U.S. and steal from people, and they spend a lot of time trying to track everyone else down to steal from. And so it's really important to not signal that you know them or anything about them, or, treat them as whatever character they want to play. And don't bother with anything else. It's what I do, and that's what everyone else does now, and that's why things are working out so much better. If they go to the point of exposing themselves or being ridiculous, then that's the point where you can turn them into the police or get security or somebody else after them. So they can't really risk completely acting out the way they'd like to without actually getting caught. But it's important to know, like with Annika Hansen, for example, that she was a Culver's manager like less than 6 months ago down in Traverse City, like temporarily. And then now she's trying to work at the Panera Bread because it's just not going to work out. She can't stay anywhere because she's running from federal charges and belongs in prison. So, it'd be nice if someone would actually just pick her up. But that's also why I don't have any respect for Tulsi Gabbard, because she knows all this, and she's not doing anything to get this person picked up, because Tulsi literally just, as she told me personally years ago in an interview, she's just going to want to do whatever Russia or China wants. So you really don't want to do anything with Tulsi. She's going to have to be fired and charged. I think something else has to happen with Pam Bondi, because she literally just walked out of the job and they didn't bother to put her in prison or try her. And this is someone who put out the wrong names. She unfairly targeted Bill Gates. She's got Betty Johnson, unfortunately, spewing off now on Bill Gates. I mean, literally anything coming out of the Endeavor Stream, which is a Russian and Chinese company that's Russian FSB, Russian GRU apparently now, and Chinese CCP is going to be bad information for you in the media. I had a hard time figuring out what was wrong with Betty Johnson. Like, I saw some stuff he put out on Sunday Morning. Just as an example, these are all like different topics, but it's kind of looped into one. You have to deal with the reality that a lot of commentators that are run by Endeavor aren't going to make any sense because they're going off of messaging from those groups. And so, like a couple months back, he had a message out about how the Olympics was satanic because that's a message the Endeavor likes to put out. They like to put out satanic stuff for the Olympics and then complain about it because they think that somehow cancels it out. It doesn't. It's just crappy, bad products and why nobody really likes the Olympics anymore. And then you also have the reality that he then was up on Sunday morning putting out material and talking about how he was honoring the life of Jesus. And frankly, the stuff he put out looked just as bad as anything that he'd ever put out about Satanism in the Olympics. It just looked as totally just as hateful and weird. So it's important to keep all that stuff in mind because it helps people keep everything just organized, like you have to know for yourself, like it can't be that somebody appears on a show and says they love Jesus, but then like Rob Bluey's Chinese CCP and he's talking about loving Jesus. That doesn't really make any sense. And he appeared with Katie Pavlik on Sunday in a show that I never watched, which also didn't make any sense because she's like Russian FSB. So literally it's just a couple of people pretending they cared about Jesus and the show's got nothing to do with Jesus. It's got all to do with a weird political agenda for countries that the U.S. wants away from. Again, part of my show is to give you some accuracy, media, and understanding of what you're actually seeing because 75% of the media is run by gangbangers out of Russia and China. It's not real media. God bless is what we used to say about Betty Johnson. Now I'd say the poor guy just looks so brainwashed. It's kind of sad because they've got him to the point of attacking Bill Gates. And I know from personal experience that Bill Gates is not the pervert of the problem in these situations. Hopefully the U.S. government will get organized enough, or another government, frankly, will probably end up doing it and simply end up, taking Endeavor Corp apart, simply finally arrest Caroline Silver, put the guy, Sam Silver is actually Corey Feldman, and some of these other people away. You could only hope. The reality is a lot of them are getting old. My ex, that turned out to be married to someone else, is Captain America. The actor Chris Evans, who hasn't had anything in like a decade, as far as work, and it's just a has-been, thank God now. These people just, none of them actually make any sense when you really listen to anything they say or do with their projects, and most of it's because they're working for the Russian or Chinese CCP. So just keep all of that in mind. Like, there's nothing really important about any of it except to know that they're actually out actively in the U.S. committing terrorist acts and trying to fundraise for their projects. And most of it's to run obfuscation campaigns for China and Russia, which is the whole point of the Captain America series, actually, anyways, which is to create a really crappy, weird show which no one would actually really want to watch and also make Americans feel stupid. The reality about all of this is that in the past, other governments have actually intervened, and I would certainly figure that will be the situation going forward. But yeah, it would be really, really nice if the U.S. government was actually organized enough to, instead of investing us in a foreign conflict with a bunch of contracting groups, CACI, Labatt, Accenture, Bose Allen, Hamilton, in the situation with Iran, if they would actually just deal with the real conflicts here in the U.S. That would be really nice. And actually take charge of managing these gang groups here, right? So I'm all like phlegmy this morning because I had a cold. So anyways, or have a cold. I also just want to remind you that, like Doug Fleming, who turned out to be Greg Bovino over the winter, is actually someone who interfered in Hollywood in SAG, because I'm somebody who had SAG credits and would have been counted as a SAG actress. There were several movies I worked on and was in where I should have been given SAG credits. And he actively organized the unions against people, myself included, who weren't Russian or Chinese CCP. So there was really no reason for him to have ever been in charge of anything around U.S. Border Patrol issues. Like, that's actually crazy that he was at ICE. And he's apparently free again. God, I hope they actually took him and put him in prison after all that, because it seems like after shooting Rachel Good and Alex Purdy, that he'd really be up for actually sitting in a prison cell. That's literally why, this Christine O.M. person that was invented got fired, but that's also Megyn Kelly. It's the same person. It's also Caitlin Collins. And it would also actually be the person many of you knew as Michelle Holtz-Brini. Somebody decided to out Sydney Sweeney, the actress, as actually being Olivia de la Pena. We already went through all of the weird conversations and how I dropped Olivia a long time ago because of her mental illness and bizarre relationship to Megyn Kelly, who's like this weird hornball murderer. And the reason I tell you all that is because Megyn's Russian and she used to be married to Patrick Witzel herself. So, apparently now Megyn's claiming that she has health problems after seeing Megyn last year. I'm like, nobody cares. Please just go away. Like, whatever's wrong with her, I think we'd all be really happy if she just went off the air altogether. Like, just stop. And she doesn't, because she's trying to do her dumb Russian obfuscation campaign, and she's also still managed by Endeavor Corp. So, keep all of it together for yourself, because like, I certainly don't want to see these people. Some of the reason they make the shows is to remind the rest of them that on your calls. Like, I'm not in the PCUSA. I don't belong to a church. I'm not interested in Jesus. I'm not interested in Judaism. I'm not interested in Islam or any of it anymore. And I don't go to 12-step groups, and I don't like those either. And I'm just not a part of any of the organizations that any of these hate groups once used to glob onto, because they certainly used to use membership in, the Chinese. Like, the Chinese CCP has definitely used 12-step groups, Russian FSB. There were a lot of them at the NA groups in Janesville. I told you about my mother's horrific experiences with trying to be part of those groups and what it did to her life. So, she wasn't even an addict. She was actually just a domestic violence victim who needed help. So, I have to tag Pastor Lee as being too Chinese CCP at Emmanuel Church in Arlington, Virginia. He's certainly somebody who could have testified more on these issues and hasn't. And he's really left a lot of people and victims to take care of it. I decided after everything went into Traverse City that he just needs to be reminded that, we're all aware that he's right there in Arlington still by, John, and he's not doing anything to curb John's operations, and may even be working too closely with him himself. So it's kind of important that people know that, because, you want to go to church to what? Worship Jesus? Maybe. I hope. I hope if you're going to churches, you're actually attending them to worship and practice your faith. But there's a lot of people in them that really aren't. And, it's the same with the mosques and the Jewish organizations. So you just really got to know, like, where you're at and what you're kind of doing. Know who you are and know what you are not, basically. Because once I decided the organizations weren't really into actually worshiping, I started getting away from a lot of them. There's a few I've attended, just passing by, but no. And as far as what the Department of Justice said about all this a long time ago, is that these organizations would definitely be mocked. They would just continue to be mocked until they simply stopped with the fake front churches and the whole thing. So, I need to also note that this is really weird. Really weird turn of events in Gaylord. Susan Diane Williams, producer in Gaylord, calling people from the United Way, posing as a shelter manager and trying to traffic in women and men in Gaylord. So I'm warning you, she's been using the United Way for that. Super weird, getting angry at people for working and getting jobs and stability in the area. She also brought in a lot of junkies that looked like they were from the Dubuque, Iowa set. That's very strange. I didn't see a lot of those in most places. Who didn't really need help, didn't certainly need housing help. Most of them seemed to have more than enough money. It was junky and crazy as they were, but and she put them all at a really weird crowded motel that smelled of urine. It's just really strange. So a motel that probably is gonna be closed down. I also need to note this came in recently. Nicole Drajewski, which many of you knew out of the dance Zumba group down in Arlington, the 2010 era, that Francine Segbefia ran, and Francine actually called her out on this and caught it, who's an actual attorney. Nicole Drajewski is Russian GRU. I actually dropped her out of my life, but she's been following myself and other people around Michigan. She was up in Traverse City. She's been traveling in other parts of Michigan, even Gaylord. Petoskey. She's been on the move, bothering people, and it turns out she actually seems to be the head of the Russian GRU. It's important to note that she's actually been married to Dan Bongino all these years, which most of us didn't know. They met back in Dubuque, Iowa when they were kids in those weird training camps there. I'm surprised this goes back that far, but that's where Nicole's been traced to. If somebody else thinks they have a different version of it for me, great. I'm just putting the information out there, but that's where people are at on. I think those two are actually married. Dan Bongino's turned out to be really nasty, and he's been after people and attacking them. It isn't just that he wasn't really a law enforcement officer, that he actually trafficked people to pay for his MP degree as a nurse practitioner, but he's actually somebody that's or was posed as a nurse practitioner, but he's been pretty hostile to people going back to the days of Table Mountain, Dubuque, Iowa in the 80s. So people that most of us, how many of you care about what happened in 1986? Other than remembering who the individuals were so you can avoid them today. But, I'd never go back to Iowa. It's weird that the rest of these people won't just go home. I must want to say that. It's like the rest of you hate all of us so much. You were so happy in goddamn Iowa in the 80s. Go back to fucking Iowa. Just go live in Dubuque, people. Because the rest of us really don't care about you or like you that much, and we're not going to want to hang out. Stop trying to make fetch happen something from 20 years ago. Like, this is now going on something from 40 years ago. Yeah, so just notable. Like, there's another person that not quite as strange as Mae Johnson, but like Rachel Maddow. I love Rachel Maddow, but she never makes any sense. And I've realized it's because she's managed by Endeavor, and so they've got her on a stream that just literally doesn't make sense. Really sweet anchor, right? Sweet anchor has her own show, doesn't make sense ever. So, yeah. And Benny Johnson, like, I'm pretty sure he's actually raped back in the fall, so he doesn't make sense. It's because he really doesn't make sense anymore. He's too busy being brainwashed and beat up on by Endeavor Corp. He can't do anything about it. So, we used to say, like, 20 years ago, I would have said, God bless today. I'm like, that's all I could ever say about any of it. As far as this earlier point, I want to come back to something for you all in The Devil Wears Prada. So, Meryl Streep turned out to be Lynn Weiss out of Dubuque, Iowa. That's the one when I was a kid that got mad at me for having medical skills and went and told Ted that I was supposed to not be educated in the sciences, that I had gotten, phalanges and knew what metatarsals were, some hands and feet parts. Decided to have me set up to be beat on so that I was supposed to work as a slave. She was very happily a part of St. Joseph's in Dubuque, which was the organization that's actually part of the cult of Isis. It's still an active cult today. You need to be aware of that. It's not a Catholic organization. So I said I really did do some work for past popes. That would be the one you need to worry about. That's the one that actually does blood drinking. They take kids out and rape them and beat them in public and in private. They demand they be labor trafficked to Endeavor Corp. And they actually followed the orders of the Russian FSB at the time, the old KGB that Cersei was running out of Dubuque at the time. So it's important for you to know that. I have a note for you in the new Devil Wears Prada film that Emily Blunt is actually not going to be in it. They put in Sydney Sweeney, as far as I know, who's a follower of David Berkowitz. That's the Son of Sam murder cult group that hasn't been broken up or ended or even stopped, apparently all over the U.S. It's important to know that Olivia de la Peña's father was actually fired from the Pentagon and used to work for the U.S. military. May have been the reason there were so many problems during the years that I was even in D.C. and finishing up stuff there. It's also important to note that so what I'm really telling you is something that people have been able to confirm for a long time, which is that Meryl Streep is basically a brainwashed gorilla from the Russian FSB herself, or works for them, takes signals from them, has extremely high anger issues at this point, and is on the move to, like, attack people. I know it maybe doesn't seem right, but everyone I've ever talked to from Washington, D.C. or otherwise who've actually seen these behaviors, they've literally decided that that's the truth. And this was decided like over 10 years ago, probably back in the 2010 era. So long before I left DC. Knowing all that, I don't understand why it would be left free, or have you put this person in prison and it's just back out again. Because Meryl Streep goes through weird phases of not having work. And I'm starting to think maybe it's because somebody actually got together and put her in prison. There really has to be a more, final solution to a person that was so actively a part of the St. Joseph's cult, Dubuque, Iowa, and actively raping and beating on kids. And, she was part of that. So, we've got the Diddy stories that were manufactured for the media about the white parties. Where's your stories? Where's your accurate, real stories of Meryl Streep actually having kids raped and beaten? Obviously not in her Meryl Streep persona character. Just like Annika Hansen doesn't go around normally in her Rachel McAdams persona. But what I'm telling you is that it's gone by the name Lynn Weiss for a very long time. I think she's calling herself Sandy these days. And she actually is not, I think she's trying to work at the Meyer downstate. I'm pretty sure it's her. She's doing dumb gorilla signals, freaking out all over the place, the whole thing. So, it's important to note that, she's a gorilla and has involved in a number of rapes and attacks on people, and that Guerrilla. I'm still trying to figure out why the government's letting these people go free. Because I don't believe they are. I think a lot of them are just paying Labatt, CIC, and Accenture to go free, but they just simply aren't needed. So, yeah, we cover all that. Part of this, also friends with Katie Couric. Remember Katie Couric used to do the Sandy Keyser character back in Jason, Wisconsin, want to get people killed. Did the setup where they, remember Donald Trump was actually part of the setup where they put the prom together in Milton High School and called Sex and Candy Prom, and then they had this poor girl killed in some jacuzzi, and it was just supposed to be for news. And it turned out it was just because she was an attractive woman who wasn't Russian or Chinese. because that actually happened. It's still a problem. Like, we have a serious problem with like quote unquote fake journalists in this country killing people because they aren't Russian or Chinese. It's really dumb. I also need to note that so right now, you've got a number of guerrillas on the warpath after Pam lost her position, causing accidents. I saw a number of setups over the winter where they were trying to get people to fall asleep and like hit petroleum trucks. I mean, it was just crazy. I didn't see anyone actually have those kinds of accidents. Thank God things have gotten better. But it's important to know that there's this Russian FSB industry that traffics people and even kills them in public and then wants to film it for TV shows. And maybe those shows are really, focused and shown in Russia and China and not here in the U.S. And like, in the U.S. it gets shown as like this woman or guy got killed or injured. Do you think maybe in like Russia or China it's like they put a hit in and killed a target here in the U.S.? And our own government didn't even bother to notice or put a stop to it? Because I think it's time to address that. I'd have a lot more respect for Congress if they would actually just simply do the job instead of like something that was invented as a talking point by a contractor out of Russia or China. I found even the hearings with Pam Bondi to be ridiculous and a joke and something that just had to be taken apart. So, I also need to know I ran to Laura Chambers up here. Wow. So nobody expected Laura Chambers, out of all the people you knew for YR Group. She was the YR director for DC back in the 2010 era. I think she came in like 2012, was in for a couple of years and left. Not a successful director. Turned out to be... Actually, she's a TV producer, it turned out. But she's also somebody that works for Endeavor Corp and part of a lot of dumb Russian FSB setups. That was why she had Chris Evans, who went by the name David Barnes, at the meetings yelling at me and everyone else. We actually finally had a big meeting, like a group meeting with several different clubs, got together and confronted her and said, we know you're a TV producer, we know you work for Endeavor, we know you're Russian. And we know that's why you keep dragging, David Barnes / Chris Evans, Captain America, out to the meetings to yell at me and everyone else. And she would record them. Just scream at people and she would record them. It's completely ridiculous. She's actually up in Gaylord, Michigan, trying to organize people. She's been trying to organize a bunch of setups to get people shot, injured, car wrecks, all of it. I guess you could say she's a literal J-Lo, J-Hag supporter. And I also noticed on her Facebook feed that she claims to have a child. Child's gone through what look like a lot of grooming gestures. That's also the same kid that had the head injury that she wanted everyone to feel sorry for. I'm going to tell you right now, Laura, nobody thinks the child had head injury that you gave that child a head injury. It's probably not your kid. I don't even know why she bothers getting to be friends with me on Facebook. It's really weird. But I'll just let her sit there because she wants to pretend she has a kind of relationship, right? So that's the item I'm reporting here, just in case anyone else needs to know. Laura Chambers, if you're entering around DC, because she's still pretending to live in Alexandria part-time, that big old mansion with her husband there, or whatever that guy is. Maybe he's her partner. Like, pretending to have had kids doesn't look like she's ever had a baby in her whole life. Looks like a genetic male that transitioned early. Has the hostility levels of one. Just if you're out there, like, Laura, nobody actually thinks that you were friends with I or anyone else at the meetings. You obviously sort of screwed over Rich Counts, who used to run those meetings at DC, so pretty much everybody else, and thought nobody else would notice, and ruined what was one of the most successful clubs in the country, Republican Party. Would you say she's a Trump person? Sure, I'd totally say she was a MAGA person. She was also a Clinton person. She was also totally into whatever weird trash. Like, if it comes out of the Russian FSB, Chinese CCP, she's down for it, but, not honest about who she was. Apparently also had a Capitol Hill job for a congressman for a long time, claimed to be from Alabama. Really, she's basically just another chick from Moscow. So now you know. I don't know. And some of the shows I just make because I have people occasionally approach me, like, well, did you know this? Did you know that? And they get, like, too hyper about it. And I don't know if it's because they're being, like, set off or shocked to that, but the reality is that they actually have to, like, go away. Because the rest of us don't want to be in these discussions. We're not interested in confronting them. We're not interested in having out with them. We're only interested in getting away, cutting them off. And frankly, this is why I don't go to a lot of organizations anymore, such as religious groups or 12-step meetings, because those are the kind of places I used to hang out. And it turned out even like, your fun political meeting is said to be a place they want to congregate. Well, you don't want to deal with it, don't go to those either. So, this is a place they want to go. But they're running out of venues and places to find any of us anymore. The rest of us, like the rest of the country that isn't Chinese or Russian, basically. So, as far as the rest of this, all I'm going to say about Laura, since I know what crowd she's running in and how they think that, Doug Fleming wants another video, well, then obviously Laura's going to be due for one. because he likes to make his weird films with Megyn Kelly and what the lines with Megyn Kelly and Taylor Swift, Reese Witherspoon, Laura Chambers. Sounds about right or due for one after all this. Y'all are nuts. And only certain people would even know what I was talking about with that, but I already covered all that in previous episodes. It sounds like that's where it's that's where all that's heading. Yeah, so and there's also an epidemic of serial killing from the Russian FSB and Chinese CCP with these dumb setups. Just to remind you, to kill and trap people to fund productions or make shows. Super ridiculous. It's all about obfuscation. I've already point out to you what it might actually be shown as in their own home countries. And I think there's really a fairly significant problem right now so far as to not getting, I mean, there's this issue with them, specifically the Chinese CCP, the Russian FSBs. They don't seem to forget things that are from like 40 years ago that don't make sense to the rest of us anymore. And they're irrelevant to the present. So there's got to be a certain amount of brain damage there. It's also important to know that they really are coming from less developed countries psychologically. Now, they have a lot of technology in them, but they don't know how to use it effectively or even what they're using. And a lot of them never actually completed real schooling. If anything, they went to private schools around the U.S., fairly bad private schools, if anything, here. And, run by the Chinese or Russians. I know because I was forced to attend Luther College in Iowa, which was a terrible school. And then I was lucky enough to go to better schools later for my college education. I went to UVA and I went to Nova. So it's important to note that, they at the best go to schools that are just terrible and don't provide them with any real education and nothing but brainwashing. So lots of money, lots of technology, no brains to use any of it correctly. It's actually the way things are falling apart. I think I upset somebody actually earlier this week because I said, the weirdos weren't getting what they want anymore, and they went, aren't they? And I said, maybe no one's getting anything. I'm like, no, resist labeling and all for nothing phrases. People are getting more of what they want than they used to, but what a lot of us wanted was what we just refused to discuss anymore with anyone else. I wanted my protective order. I wanted my life and my freedom from weirdos. And, it's just a life of moving on for the rest of us. But so, heads up, Gaylord's the new terrorist location in Michigan. That's where they're going to want to put everything through this year, I suppose, if that's what your deal is. I guess Annika might want to hot-foot it down to Gaylord, because that's where all the fun's going to be for her weirdo gorilla people. And that's all I really have to say about any of this for any of you. Hopefully the state of Michigan will get the whole thing under control. Because I can tell you right now, Trump is nuts. He's literally a borderline. Like, one day he gets information from... God only knows where he gets his ideas from actually anymore. Because it sounds like he's on the phone with the Kremlin one minute. They're like, oh yeah, we got him back. We got him brainwashed. And then it's like the next minute, somebody from the White House or, a doctor or somebody fixes him. Like, no, enough with the Russian GRU brainwashing. Time to get your brain back. And he calms down, right? So he's making these weird contradictory statements. Almost like Benny Johnson. No, wait, Benny Johnson's actually just totally gross sometimes because he's listening to everything Endeavor Corp's telling him to say because the guy's literally a victim. Yeah. So anyways, this is me, Deborah K, for your another super informative episode of Odds and Ends. Obviously Simple Yoga with Deborah will be returning, maybe only a little bit on YouTube. It'll be back on OnlyFans later this year. But, this is me doing some little reminder notes. I actually have to do some of this for, as much for the Supreme Court as for people I've known in the media, people I knew years ago, like decades ago in the entertainment industry, and then also, for the general public, because you're being really hit with an onslaught of just bad information that doesn't even make sense. Like, again, Benny Johnson literally, talking about Satanism at the Olympics and putting up satanic pictures a few months back. And then now he put up pictures that look totally satanic of Jesus Christ on Sunday and doesn't know the difference. Like, people, y'all need help. Like, y'all need some kind of feedback that fixes this. I'm going to do it. And I promised Border Patrol as much as the Supreme Court that I would do it. So, that's me. Here I am. This has been another episode of Simply Stated Odds and Ends with me, Deborah K. I'm going to let you go now, but, we're kind of tapering out of the super intense Simply Stated episode. So I'll see you another time. Bye.